Okay, so I'm happy to talk a bit about the book and the subject. Um, I want to talk about the five powers themselves, but also a little bit address the writing of the book, how creativity is involved in what we're doing. In other words, that the meditation cushion isn't a kind of shut down, closed down, but that it can be a source of creativity and how that works. And so I'm going to explore that together. So fundamentally, Buddhist practice is, of course, a vast teaching. The whole huge, vast teaching is actually telling us one thing, which is that the only place that we can look for freedom, liberation, is in the heart of our experience, not in fixing the conditions as we want them. But we dive into the heart of experience and there find our liberation. And we can meet and know a very pure place, a very pure freedom that is really deep inside or deep as the source of our experience. And at the same time, there are all the coverings and the conditionings and the pains and scars of life that we collected on the way. And so we need tools and qualities to be able to look and explore, both to know at the heart of experience a pure place, and also to be able to meet and wisely deal with the coverings, the the obstacles, the conditioning and the suffering that is covering this pure place. So tools and qualities are very much part of the Buddhist practice teaching. The five powers are a very classic teaching talking about these tools and qualities. And why I really like them as a teaching is that they are kind of extensions of mindfulness, but they're not too complex, they're not too esoteric, they're not too mystical, they're not beyond. They're really possible to understand, like mindfulness is. And the truth is, we have those capacities already. We have mindfulness already. We have all of them already. We are born with primal trust. We can say also we were born with primal fear, but a baby that's sucking at the breast knows primal trust. There are many capacities that we have that are built in to us as living beings, and these are called in the tradition indriya. Indriya is capacities, qualities, which include the five powers and include qualities and capacities like the vitality that we have, the energy that we have, the basic energy, our senses, qualities of a human being. They're called indriya. Indriya coming from the Indian god of the storm. They're clearly, indriya is clearly about power. It's the most powerful of the Indian gods. They become powers when those capacities are developed to overcome their opposite. And I will go through them now. Then they're called bala, powers in the Pali language. Not just capacities, or potentials. They're powers when we've developed them and they overcome their opposite. And by the way, I was really interested to write a book on the five powers because I looked and looked and looked, and there isn't a book on the five powers. So I decided that that was really needed. So the first power, trust, faith, confidence, in the Pali saddha. It becomes a power when we are able to overcome the opposite: anxiety, worry, confusion, fear, wanting to hide, helplessness, and so on. Especially today, this is a big story. We really need, of all those 5 powers, one of the major powers that we really need to develop these days is the first one. When everyone around us is losing their head in panic and fear, anxiety and worry and confusion, that's the time when we need not to lose our head and to know to stand steady in the middle of changing life. The second power is energy, which includes aspiration, determination, motivation, virya. Virya is the Pali word for energy. And it's energy, when it overcomes the opposite, it becomes a power, overcomes passivity, overcomes the sense that we can't do anything, we have no drive, no motivation, we feel weak, collapsed, lazy. All we can do is turn on the TV, nothing left. It's an act of failure or reduced virya. The path of least resistance, going to what's the easiest, is sometimes a lack of the power of virya. And I won't go into it too much, but I can't at this point go into all the 5 powers in any detail. But a good example of 5 powers, and I talk about it in my book, is the the second power of energy is the hawk that flies on the wind, that needs just the right little bit, the right movement to keep it going. And it doesn't need to flap crazily like some other birds do. So we can do both. We can find ourselves like a hawk on the wind, or we can find ourselves flapping our wings like crazy in order to fly. The third power is mindfulness. It's also presence. It's also awareness, sati, and we all know the word sati and mindfulness as a theme in our practice. It becomes a power when we overcome automatic pilot, when we're not living on not noticing, we're living on the automatic reactivity, we're living in a cloud of just habits, we're just minimal awareness, just enough to go through our day. And it's a bit like anesthesia in a way. Sleepwalking is another English phrase. Sleepwalk through our life. That's the opposite of mindfulness. And when we develop mindfulness, we do feel we're not sleepwalking anymore through our life. The simple act of going out of our house and walking down the street is rich with presence, with noticing what's going on, noticing our body, noticing the clouds, noticing who we meet on the way, noticing the small flowers. So that would be the development of mindfulness. The fourth power is calm. It's also concentration. It's also steadiness. It's the power to stop, samadhi. And the power to dive into in a meditative state so that we are highly concentrated on the object of meditation, and all the disturbing stimuli and conditions and the senses and the thoughts, they don't necessarily disappear, but they get far, far less important. So it's the ability to, in a way, feel our mind like a calm, still pool. And it becomes a power when it overcomes the opposite. The sense of being scattered, chaotic, disturbed, agitated, jumping around, can't settle down, easily disturbed by everything that arises, pulled and pushed by life constantly. That's the opposite. And samadhi really works to overcome that opposite, slowly, slowly, and feel that our mind is not only a still pool, but a deep, still pool. The fifth power is wisdom, insight, awakening, realization, you can say. It's actually realizing Dharma, namely the truth of things, instead of illusion. So, for example, we did it just now with the meditation. If we see our thoughts as just a load of troubling noise in the mind, we're not really engaged with the thought, and we don't see the thought. We just react it or believe it, or it controls us without us knowing. There's an ignorance in it. So wisdom, panya, is a power when it overcomes this ignorance. It overcomes attachment, habits, wanting to escape from things. It overcomes the sense of a superficial life, a shallow life, not subtle. It's funny that in the old tradition, the Buddha called, or the Buddhist community called, those people that don't meditate the thick ones, who are thick. And those that did meditate are thin in the sense of subtle. They can go under the surface of things. So the five powers all work together. And the image is of 5 horses pulling the carriage. The carriage is us on our journey to awakening. Mindfulness is the lead horse, because without mindfulness, we don't know where we're going. It shows us direction. It shows us, it's the compass. It leads all the other horses. The next pair of horses, trust and wisdom. And the next pair of horses, energy and concentration. And all the 5 are needed to pull the carriage. For example, wisdom without trust can be very mechanical, analytic, can be a bit afraid, can be afraid of going beyond. So there will be a sense that it needs to, the wisdom has a barrier. It can't fly, it can't go beyond. There's a lot of very intellectual tradition inside the Buddhist teaching. The Abhidharma is really, really complex teaching on Buddhist psychology, and there is a lot of analytic, intellectual stuff there. And there's something in trust which allows us to go beyond that. In my book, I have the image both in the writing and in the and one of the pictures that trust. One image of trust is trapeze, the leap into the unknown. We jump into the unknown. And the trapeze, if you know, is where we let go of one bar and we have the other bar coming, and we need to just launch into space in order to grab the other bar when it's on its way. And that needs trust to go beyond the normal mind. So wisdom without trust can be within a lot of boundaries and barriers and intellectual analytic work. But trust without wisdom can bring us to blind belief, blind faith. We can worship the guru. We can chase rainbows. And we feel that that's, well, we have trust. It's beautiful. I trust the rainbow. Okay. But you spend your whole life chasing rainbows with trust, but not enough wisdom. So it can often lead to fundamentalism. The wisdom modifies the trust or the belief to avoid fundamentalism, extremism, and so on. Energy without samadhi, the other two horses. Energy without samadhi can be agitated. The horse is kind of running about, jumping. It pushes, and then collapses. Or it says, I think someone needs to be muted here. There's quite a lot of noise in the background somewhere. The horse of energy is just not in tune, is running forward and backwards, jumping, full of determination, and then says, no, I'm stopping. And can be very agitated. There's still a lot of... Someone isn't muted. Okay, that's better. And samadhi without energy, that goes in an interesting place. Deep concentration, but it can be too much of a shutdown. We can get really stuck on the cushion, and it doesn't. And we get attached to samadhi because it's sort of a deep stopping, and it can be states of mind that are interesting, but it doesn't have the energy to fly. It too much shutting down. And the hawk on the wind is an image of how right energy balances our samadhi. So I want to throw it out to you all. Which is your power? Which is your favorite power? Which is the one you feel that you're good at in your inner life? And which is the power that you feel is difficult for you? And which powers you feel are out of balance in your life? Just think about it a little bit. Where are you out of balance when the five horses are not really pulling in equally in the right way, in harmony? So I have to say that all the powers are already within our vipassana practice, our mindfulness practice that we know, the meditations that we do, just like in the example I gave earlier of practice. They're all already there. It's hard to imagine our mindfulness practice, which hasn't got any trust, at least in the minimum trust. Because we'll feel all the time resistance, we'll feel against something, we'll feel that all the time there's a friction between us and what it is that we see and what we notice, between us and the breath, between us and the body, between us and the mind. It's already there in the sense of our power to be with things. But they certainly do need development, all the powers, because we do know about mindfulness, but the other four are often not developed. And then mindfulness can get a bit technical, and it needs to be balanced with the other four powers. It's interesting, the five powers together really amplify each other. They really, they're not just adding to each other, they amplify each other. Like I mentioned before, trust amplifying the wisdom, allowing us to launch into places that the mind can't easily get to. Trust allows us to go beyond the limits. And so they all help each other, the five powers. One of the texts is quite curious and interesting. And I've never found another text that talks about this. How do you measure if a teacher or a wise man is authentic or not? So you go all the way over to India, you climb up the Himalayas, you go to a monastery, and there you meet a teacher that seems to be a charismatic, wonderful teacher, and he has all these students around him. How do you know that he's a good teacher? How can you assess him? How can you, or her? And the interesting thing is, the five powers in the tradition are exactly the way that you can check yourself and others for your spiritual progress, which is questionable. I don't think you need to do it. I don't think it's important so much to check or to measure, but it's just interesting and curious that the five powers, if a teacher or a practitioner or yourself develop all of those five, the trust, the energy, motivation, the heart, in other words, the mindfulness, the calm, the steadiness, and the wisdom, you're in, you know, you're learning from someone. It's okay. They passed the test. This is this is like the test. I love a quote from the poet Wordsworth that actually talks about all of these five powers in just one sentence. And I thank Rowan Saxena for pointing this out to me. And in one of Wordsworth's poems, he says, "With an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things." I really like it. An eye is mindfulness. Made quiet is samadhi. The power of harmony and the deep power of joy, harmony, trust, joy, energy, we see into the life of things, namely wisdom. They're all there actually in one sentence from the poet Wordsworth. So I want to bring an example of me writing the book actually, and how these powers helped while writing the book. And I'll just give you some example of each of them. I certainly needed trust when the words didn't come, or faced with just a white paper or a blank computer screen. Then trust is needed, surrender is needed, a sense that words will come. I trust them to come. It needs deep letting go rather than pressure that I have to write the best piece. So trust is trusting something deeper inside us, inside me, that does know. And when you write something, it does know what's needed. And very often we just don't listen to that voice, but the trust says, you do know somewhere deep down. I also needed trust in all the other team that I was working with, the artist, Alessandra, and Rowan and Rebecca, the editors. I just need to trust them. They know their job. Otherwise, I can get really obsessed. My book, and someone's playing with it. My words, and someone's editing it. So it's trust here is instead of ego. I just trust the wisdom of others. Energy, that's the long term. This book took 3 years. At the same time, it is no time at all. It's just happening in the present. But the energy to continue, that is an energy that does need to engage with energy. It's a sense that instead of needing a lot of pressure, I must do it now, and deadlines, and I have to press, and I have to get there, and so on and so on. It's an energy which is much, much more subtle, which is just being there day by day, never mind 3 years or no years. It's just aligning ourselves with life. It's saying life is bigger than me. It will take me. It's happening, this book. It's happening. The right time, I'm writing. The wrong time, I'm not writing. So it certainly was needed in certain moments when I felt, this is a big project. Wow. But the energy of continuity was sort of letting go into that sense that, oh, I'm here. Mindfulness is interesting, mindfulness. It's small moments where the words arrive. The words arrive in mindfulness. They aren't there, and then they're there. Where do they come from? What gave them power? Why did that word arise? Mindfulness allows us to engage with the small moments of language arising. And it's very interesting because right speech, one of the Eightfold Path, is really a mindfulness, not only watching the process, but actually watching if the words are helpful, beneficial, ethical, and so on, and true. And that does need mindfulness. Calm. I certainly needed calm as the quiet spaces that allowed me to listen deeply to the words when they came up, or to invite the words. I certainly needed calm, samadhi. And I did used to meditate before writing, maybe not long, but take 5 minutes, 10 minutes actually of samadhi, of going deeply into a kind of zero place, and then allowing from the zero place the words would arise and the deep listening would arise. And wisdom, all the time. Wisdom is needed all the way. Whatever wisdom actually is, getting the sense of the rightness of something. The Buddha said the whole of the Dharma, you can say, is one word: what fits. What fits. The fittingness, it's very hard to describe that. That's wisdom. You can't say what fits. A word that you produce, that you create, does it hurt someone? Is it helpful? Is it right to the context? What's it doing? what word is needed, all of that, it fits, and it's really hard to describe that in any other way. So a final piece, I just want to talk for a few minutes about how it is to write a book. Because in my life, I've written around 15 books, and I'm still writing. How is it? Well, the first thing to understand is that the Dharma practice does not create a kind of passive sitting on the cushion, shutting ourselves down. We can often get that image that Dharma practice is about shutting down. And sometimes it's needed, viveka. Sometimes it's needed. I don't dispute that sometimes we really simply need to shut down, go on a retreat, stop everything, and shut the doors. And that can be very valuable. But actually, the Dharma practice is built into life, and it can help us to begin to be curious about what's going on in this being, in this living being, mind, body, spirit, and what's going on in the world, and how can I engage with the world from that place. So Dharma can be very creative, can create a lot of a beautiful, creative, poetic, imaginative, and it's simply because we open the box. We open the box of our inner world with curiosity, with interest, with samadhi and concentration. And we just see a lot more, and that is a creative process. And it happens in meditation. In a way, it happened in the meditation we did together. For example, working with the breath, we might not exactly feel what the instructions are, that we break down the breath into its components, or we feel the breath in our hands and feet. Can we do that? Can we feel the breath in our hands and feet? Well, yes, but it can involve imagination, creative imagination, to actually explore beyond the boundaries. And creative imagination can feel what it might be like to feel the breath in our hands and feet, not just in our lungs and chest. So meditation always, in a way, works with imagination in going beyond. So meditation is very much like learning a musical instrument. It has quite a lot of playfulness. It has flexibility of mind. It brings flexibility. I remember one retreat I was teaching at Kibbutz in Bar many, many years ago. And I had a deadline to finish this book. And the deadline was the last day of the retreat. The publisher said, you have to send it now at that time, otherwise we don't accept it. Oh, and I was on teaching retreat. But what actually happened was between every meditation and every one-to-one I had, I rushed into my room and did 10 minutes of writing and then rushed out again. And I had to be very, very clear that in this 10 minutes, that's it. I will not correct anything. It has to be done. Finished, final draft, 10 minutes of writing, and then whoosh, back to the hall. And it was amazing the way it worked. And afterwards I reflected, how could such a thing work? And I realized it because our meditation practice makes a flexibility and a dynamic nature in the mind, a flexibility and fluidity and a playfulness in our mind, instead of being stuck with issues, problems, frustrations. I can't do it, it's too much, it's not possible, etc. I think meditation helps us to go beyond that and to really feel the flexibility of mind. And then Creativity is so much central to Dharma because Dharma is about senses. And we notice sensory awareness. We go deeper into what our senses are telling us. And they always have layers and layers and layers. We, as I said before, we explore what our hands are telling us, and we begin to see every finger that it's telling a different story. We look at the mind, and it's so many levels, and so we begin to feel the mind is so rich. Impressions, bits of thought, colors, chains of thinking that connect with each other, feelings behind thoughts. All of this is levels and levels and levels that we notice. And that's basically creative. It's basically eros. The music that you heard at the beginning of this event was a friend of mine that set my poem to music on, do you remember? Or sorry, have you forgotten? And it talks about the edges of leaves and the pictures inside clouds and so on. And it really, meditation helps to peel off the control on our senses. And we begin to see more, feel more, listen more deeply, go to places that are unknown. And that's the creative process. That's not a problem to write a book or to paint a picture. And it helps us also to be less of a self, less of an ego. Krishnamurti said, beauty is when the self is not. Our ability to connect with things is the source of creativity. When writing the book, I felt many times, for me, writing was a meditation. It was itself a meditation. The words arriving from consciousness as the source, appearing as a form in the consciousness, and then I catch it, write it, and then it goes. Just like the words that you're listening to right now. So to summarize and to conclude, I have to say that the 5 powers are still powers. That means they do engage us in a process that we have to notice and develop qualities. And they are qualities that are really important in driving the carriage, the horses that are driving the carriage to awakening and freedom. But nevertheless, they're still powers that we develop and we can describe. And in the end, existential reality is beyond all the powers. In the end, everything dissolves. The book dissolves, the writing dissolves. There's just the totality of things. There's no book to write. There's nothing to do. There's something there which is in the formless. And I do have to express that as a kind of concluding thought or inspiration, that not to forget that the formless inspires the form. The formless, something really beyond the form of powers and the book and the words. The formless inspires the form. And also, form inspires the formless. It also works in the other direction. So, that's all I want to say from my side. And I'd like to invite Rachel. We have questions later, actually. I think what we're going to do is have we can have Rachel and then Daniela, and then